Welcome. Happy New Year. It is our very first session for 2021. And what a great session we have ahead today. We have James Grenning, one of the authors of Agile Manifesto. And there is a lot of events that are being booked and scheduled for February to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Agile Manifesto. I think we are ahead of them. We are probably the first one here to start with that. So you're going to hear from James a lot of things, and then you can go to the other events and validate everything we're hearing. I don't know. I think we have a chance here to see. Welcome everyone. We have a lot of friendly faces, and then we have some new friends that are joining. I understand that some are staying, have their cameras closed because it's kind of like dinner time and probably they're chewing. That's fine. But welcome, James, and thank you for joining our group. And we didn't really plan any presentation because it doesn't make so much sense to present anything. We thought we're going to run this like a fireside chat kind of session. Our group is famous for, there you go. We have fireside. Our group is very famous for for not being shy and speaking up and having questions and chatting along. So let's be the same group that we have always been. The only thing I thought we'll start with is just a couple of initial questions to get James starting. Like, well, first of all, hello.
Hi, Ardita. And hi, Cheesy. I know some of the people out here. Hi, Paul.
Yes.
Hi, everybody else. There must be nothing to do at night where you people are. Just saying.
I don't think that's the reason why they're here. So one of the things that I wanted to start with, and everybody feel free to start chatting and questions to throw as we go along. But to start with was who had the idea to get together a group of people and to say, hey, let's do something about this? Who sent the invite? Who organized it? Just
I'm supposed to remember this?
I think so. It's just 20 years ago, not a big deal.
Yeah, well, at least from my perspective, it was Bob Martin was really involved in organizing it. He and Alistair, I think, were doing the most, Alistair Coburn. And as far as I could tell, Bob invited me. I worked with Bob. I've known Bob since the early 80s, and we're friends, and we worked in big companies together and that sort of thing. And I was working for him at Object Mentor at the time, and there were two possible places we might go: an island in the Caribbean or Snowbird.
Really? And you chose Snowbird?
Well, if it was up to me, I would have chosen Snowbird, yes. Because I love to ski,
Oh, there you go. But
I believe that they were doing it. And actually, I don't think it was the first meeting of its kind. I think there was a meeting similar the year before, which
really?
Yeah.
What was the year before? What happened there?
Well, I don't know. I wasn't there.
Oh. So the fact that they didn't, that is not a famous meeting means that probably not much happened there to remember. They needed more follow-ups.
Yeah, I don't know. But at any rate, nothing happened, but I wasn't there. So it had nothing to do with me. I was learning from all these people I was with. So.
And how then you all got to Snowbird, and who decided how to run this event?
Well, let's see. I'll get a more suitable background if we're talking about Snowbird. Not Chicago, not alligators, not another gator, not my book, not the logo, not the airplanes, not the pool room, There's Snowbird.
There you are. You're prepared.
Well, these are the toys I play with every day. I've been, whenever we went into lockdown, I'd already started on trying to automate my my work, and it's only taken me a little more than a year, and I still haven't released anything. But it's a difficult challenge for what I'm trying to do here. But at any rate, so what was the question, Ardita?
So how did this session run? How did you all get together? How did you organize? How did you run these questions? How did it all go? How did you end up to 4 values and 12 principles?
Well, we got to wait a little while before that, because
okay.
So I'm curious, how did you keep Alistair under control?
Oh, who did that? How would that be possible? But I was part of this group of extreme programming enthusiasts. I was part of the extreme programming contingent, and learning a lot from them. So it's too bad that Ron isn't here. I don't know what Ron's excuse is, but it was going to be kind of fun to see Ron. I've only seen him, being a curmudgeon on Twitter. It's busy, I'm sure, in Detroit. Isn't there somebody else here from Detroit? Yeah, so we have to check on Ron to see if he's okay. Yeah, there's Scott.
Scott is there, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just go over to his house after we're done here.
Okay.
Yeah, so Bob is asking me about going to this meeting, and of course, so there's a little skiing, of course, I'll do that. But look what Bob called this meeting in this picture. Can you see it? The Lightweight Methods Summit. And I've used this picture before. That's why I happen to have it handy. I got it out.
We can't see it. It's not focused. It's not centered.
All right. Well, then it says, James, you want to go to the Lightweight Methods Summit?
Okay.
And, could you imagine if you were part of the Lightweight Manifesto? You're a lightweight coach. And, so one of the first things that Ward Cunningham said is, we're going to need a new name. It's like, oh, why is that? It's like, who wants to be known as a lightweight? It's like, oh, okay. So a new name was one of the things that needed to be, so kind of an answer to your question, a new name was needed.
Thank you for thinking about the future and saving us from embarrassment 20 years after.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, maybe the first meeting was, they kept it branded as lightweight, and maybe that's what happened. But if you think about, I don't know, some of you people were, of course, around back then doing work, and kind of one of the reasons why that meeting happened was because IBM was buying all the rational tools, and software development was going down this path that looked like it was going to get heavier, and we were just starting to learn about lighter things like extreme programming. That was, the name extreme programming got people to pay attention. It's like, what is that? You have to wear elbow pads and some of the stupid jokes at the time, and a helmet to do the programming. You're going to kill the person next to you, or what? What's going to happen there? But so that got people to kind of, I think if it wasn't called extreme programming, there probably wouldn't be an Agile, because at least I know I probably wouldn't have been involved in it, and probably Bob and company, we might not have bumped into it if it was called really sensible ways of working, or I forget, Kent had a different name for it, which he said, if I'd named it that, it probably wouldn't have gone anywhere. But sensible programming or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But right, and so the world.
Oh my God, sensible coach! You're making me think now. That doesn't sound good at all.
We could have called it something like the safe way to engineer or something. Oh.
Don't go there.
Have I been out of touch for a while? Does that mean something now?
Yeah, now I do need that extra beer.
Mm-hmm.
And no offense to anybody who's trying to make the world better by keeping it safe or by mastering it with Scrum or whatever. But so I'll be distracted constantly because it is late in the day here, and this beer is going to need refreshing in a second. So anyway, that was kind of how that meeting happened. And then, so how did we end up brainstorming for things that people actually agreed with? I think was one of the questions you shot me over Twitter today to think about. And I completely forgot this, but a friend of mine, Jean Johansson, some of you probably know Jean from hanging out at conferences. we were, when Agile actually became a thing, and, I was kind of surprised because, it was gaining in popularity. And he said, yeah, after that meeting, you told me that you threw out the thing that extreme programmers always had with them. And as proof, here they are.
Cards.
You brought the note cards. John wasn't at the meeting, but I had retold, I guess, to him what happened. And one of the things, as an extreme programmer, we always had note cards with us. I don't know if this is true or not, because this is an implanted memory now with John, but it sounded like the kind of thing I would have done at that time. And actually, if you go back before then, so this is, about 2001, and in the 80s and early 90s, the big company that I worked for, it's the same place that Bob worked, Bob Martin, we were learning total quality management. And part of that was the rebranding of, quality, and Deming and all his, wrote books and brought it back here to the United States. And structured problem solving was really big, and ways to brainstorm without giving people, tainting the conversation. Like in a brainstorm done out loud, the first kind of a little bit off the wall idea that gets shot down by the lead guy there, boom, that shuts everybody up really fast. And so we would do our brainstorming at Teradyne in the late 80s, early 90s on Post-it notes and note cards. And so if we wanted to, answer a question like what's wrong with software development or something like that, people would first think about it and write something down. This is kind of the roots of playing poker too. The same stuff that I experienced back in the, in corporate America. But, write down some things and then let's put them out there and see, if we have similar things that we agree with. And if there's things that, we could, make a statement. I guess there was some effort to make a few statements. I don't know that the number 4 was important, but, that's how many came out. So, but that's, and then it was kind of an interesting meeting, a bunch of people that are all opinionated around a room.
Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. How is that? Because they were all leaders of certain ideas that they wanted to bring up, right? They were all, as you said, opinionated. How did you converge?
Well, there was, I guess, a common thing that was, that brought us all kind of together was that the world seemed to be getting heavier in software processes. And, so that was the common thread. Now, foggy around exactly what happened because this was quite a long time ago, and I didn't try to even remember it until like 10 years ago. And, that was in the time when pictures were not actually, you didn't get them from your place that were developed as pictures. They ended up on CDs. And so now, like, where I've got a lot of pictures from that era, but I cannot find them in all the artifacts I've got laying around, in my bins of photographs at home.
Wow, they might go for a lot of money on Kijiji.
Well, yeah, if I could find them, but probably not.
So who took the picture that is on the background of the manifesto?
I'm not sure, but rumor has it that that I'm in that picture. And it kind of, if I look at the other people, I go, yeah, that could be me, but because it's kind of grainy. But it was a little photo op show. But Ward turned it into the Agile website. So, but it was kind of interesting. So Steve Meller, if he was not present, this is one of the things I remember because I was sitting near him, and we have an affinity to embedded systems. Right? So he also has worked a lot, and we would run into each other at the embedded systems conferences and things. So he kept insisting that the word software, that the word code not be in the Agile manifesto, because code was maybe almost in there, and it got abstracted to running software from running code. Because he was really into modeling, and he was, and convert the models into code, and that was, one of the things that impacted the wording of those statements. And the other really strange thing, and I'm going to bring up this slide to illustrate it here. I'll just tell you my little short story on the Times. I don't know, anybody remember this book? Watts Humphreys, Managing the Software Process.
Very, very popular, like considered, a must-read kind of book.
Yep, must-read book. And now I'm not sure if this is what Watts meant, but what we were taking from it at that time was, if you had better people, the process wouldn't matter. And again, I don't know that he meant that. And I've heard from people that know him and say, no, he didn't mean that. But I don't know. That's just the message we got, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of like the Agile Manifesto. The things on the left over the things on the right. You mean don't do the things on the right? I can't be for that. Kind of like one of those things, right? Where something maybe might have been misunderstood. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But what we were thinking, we went to the VP of a large electronics company that's nearly dead now. It starts with a big giant M, and they were innovators for decades. And we were going to teach them extreme programming because we'd done a pilot there and it was really successful. And they said, this coding thing is not a skill that it's not a critical skill. We don't really need that. What we need to do is design work, and then we'll send the coding off to a low-cost place somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. And then the code is, it's not an important skill. Anyone can do that. And, so we're kind of scratching our heads. But this was at the top of the big M company, what their perspective on it was, because if the process was better and if you could just do the hard work, the design and partitioning and all that the other parts would be easy.
I would say 20 years after, they still think that.
Well, they're gone. They're not completely gone. I still have a relationship with some of them, and they recently, not because of my NDA, which is long expired by now, they were trying to dig out from underneath doing too much modeling. Mm. Right. So that's all I'm going to say. Mm-hmm. I don't think I can get in trouble for, it's way past. They haven't hired me for a while, so to hell with them. No, just kidding.
Hire you. So we have some questions.
I wouldn't say anything to embarrass my customer, but I mean, the truth was, it was the Times, and that's what they were pursuing that, and it turned out to not work in the end for them very well. Mm-hmm. So, and they know that.
We have some questions going on. Paul, do you want to ask about how often were these folks getting together prior to the manifesto?
Yeah, so the manifesto is kind of like the stake in the ground, the starting point for a lot of people. Yeah. And when I think back to like the first XP conference, it was maybe 200-ish people, and now the Agile conference is 3,000 or something. Yeah. But how often were the manifesto authors getting together prior to that? Because I'm familiar with like the PLOP conferences, but I don't have any of the history of that area. So how much did you know each other prior to getting together at Snowbird?
Well, the extreme programming contingent knew each other. Ron, Kent, Ward, Martin, Bob Martin, me. We knew each other because at Object Mentor, Bob's company, we were teaching people. I think, Paul, that's probably where I would have met you, right? At an extreme programming immersion. Yeah. Where we were trying to teach people about extreme programming. And so we were working together on that. It was Object Mentor's business, but they were the people teaching us so we could teach other people. And right, so there's that. And but so the question?
Well, it's like it's a very disparate group of people, and some of them I still don't have many interactions with, but like the XP contingent is pretty solid. But how did you pull in the Steve Mellers and the Ken Schwabers that I wasn't aware of till after?
Oh,
XP?
yeah, okay. So well, I think that Bob probably knew Steve Meller, and I know Bob reached out to some other people, and Alistair maybe has a different group he hangs out with, and Jim Highsmith, different group. So they Jim was maybe more business side, and Alistair, and then the Scrum people, Ken and
Sutherland.
Those guys.
Yeah, those Sutherland. Guys. I was going to say Donald Sutherland, but I know it's not Donald Sutherland. Okay. But so, it was a different group together. And So it was, I think, the work of Bob and Alistair that got that guest list together. And I think Mary Poppendick was invited, and there were a couple other people invited that couldn't make it. I think Grady Booch was invited, and I don't know, because I wasn't part of that. I was invited by Bob. It's like, do you want to go? It's like, well, yeah, of course I want to go. And yeah, so now I have this picture up here. The kind of surprising thing about this document is that first statement, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Because me, as an extreme programming person, as an engineer, I was thinking, oh, thank goodness for extreme programming. It's such a sensible way to work for an engineer. We should have helped more people do that. And they're pretty much talking about the people aspect of it. And so the people aspect, this mystery of the people. It's like, because they were saying, well, Alistair would say, well, the process is important, but it's not as important having the right people. And I totally agree with that. But still, being an engineer, it's hard to put my arms around that. But certainly that was a big surprise to me on how much effort was put into that, the people part. And
who brought more of that?
Who
brought people?
The people aspect. You think I'll just Ward and Kent, certainly. I mean, their perspective with extreme programming. You remember extreme programming for things like TDD, but you don't remember it for the Bill of Rights. What is a developer? What's a programmer's right, and what's a customer's right? So I'm not going to be able to recite them, of course, but programmers get to do the estimating and decide technical things, and the business people get to change their mind. It's like, oh, well, shouldn't we try to get them to not change their mind? It's like, they could sign a document saying they won't change their mind. And Ken said, no, you can get them to sign that document, but they're still going to change their mind. So get good at change instead. Right. So.
Should we go more for questions, or do you want to add more on this?
I mean, I would say the only thing these days is many people have never experienced the heavyweight processes that these lightweight processes were in opposition to. So in some ways, it's a little bit confusing for people to wonder about all this, because they never experienced, the DRM method or all these other methodologies where people would make jokes about, you would put all the binders that represent your process on a shelf, and you would basically measure the width of your binders. So this is like a 3-foot process.
Well, are you talking about SAFe, Alistair? Is that what you're talking about?
I don't have any experience with SAFe, so I don't want to talk about SAFe. But I lived through all these methodologies where people would say they had a very prescriptive process of what the artifacts that you would generate.
The sad thing is that I've seen some companies in their Agile processes and binders and on the shelf.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I would definitely say that depending on the industry you're in, there could still be as much documentation being produced through what they would consider to be a lightweight process, and some of it's driven by external regulatory factors, but a lot of it is driven by sort of that lack of understanding of what governance truly is.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you need to produce documentation as part of the way you work, that was that. But this was just like the stuff that was telling you how to produce the documentation. Like, it wasn't the documentation; it was the process for creating the documentation that was quite extensive.
Yeah, that could be like a CMM sort of. That could be a legacy of CMM as well. I mean, have your process documented, make sure you're following the process, and sort of taking that to the insane extreme.
So I want to get another question here from Hino. Is there anything you would change about the Agile Manifesto today?
Can I change that question, Ardita?
Sure, it's your question.
Because I mean, it's one.
It would be revision.
Yeah, we don't have versions here.
Can I submit a change request for that question, please? I'll get the necessary signatures as well. So So what I really wanted to, I mean, this was a question I just wanted to put on the back burner if it ever comes up, but what I never really understood or knew is if you actually went into that lightweight methods summit with the intent of coming out with a manifesto, with the intent of coming out with something like this, or were there other objectives to that summit?
Well, I wanted to go skiing, so
well, for you have a really good objective, but okay, so from the summit itself,
I think there was a desire early that was mentioned, and maybe it was mentioned beforehand. Bob Martin would be a better guy to ask because he doesn't forget stuff like I do, and he would have been part of trying to figure that out. But I have heard Bob say, and I do remember that the idea of putting together some kind of manifesto, which sounded very communist to me, at the beginning of that meeting, that we need some kind of statement of what we're here for. And so that was a stated thing. I know by the time we were there it was, and may have been stated before that, in the invitations or whatever. I have no artifacts to back that up though.
Okay. Well, now you mentioned that communist idea when Cheesy introduced me to John Kern for the first time. I said, "Hi, John. I'm Hino Marx," and he said, "Oh, you're Hino Marx," and I wrote a manifesto. So, so clearly, you were not the only one thinking that.
True story. I was there.
Yeah, you were there too.
I'm going to follow up because it's on the same line. I'm going to miss some of the questions, but a question from Rob. And I'm letting him ask. So what was the background? Or Rob, do you want to change your mind on the question? Or?
Come on, Rob.
Didn't I warn against this, by the way?
So I've always been interested by the phrasing of the value of the items on the right versus the items on the left. And it introduces a spectrum of thinking. I was wondering what the background to that was.
Say again.
The values on the right versus the values on the, so the phrase at the bottom that says that is while there is value on the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. What was the reason for introducing that?
For the thing at the bottom?
Rob?
Yeah.
For each of the statements.
No, for the thing at the bottom.
For the thing at the bottom,
how did that structure come about? Because it's kind of an interesting pattern. Like, who was able to formulate that pattern?
Yeah, well, that was kind of it was an interesting thing that evolved from that, which is, there was no agreement that processes were not valuable, right? But there was an agreement that people working together is the most important thing. And they obviously need processes and tools, but I suppose we didn't have Jira to point at in those days, just to pick something today, which defines what Agile is. I don't know. In those days, you would have had other big things that were trying to be done, and so the idea that what we want to do is find ways to work together. And we're going to need tools, but let's not lead with the tools, I think is kind of where that came from. And, the second point, with documentation there, extreme programming is silent about documentation, and Scrum is silent about documentation, and Agile is nearly silent about documentation, just saying, what would be wrong with comprehensive documentation? Now, maybe a different word could have been chosen there, but I know, having worked at companies that bought into the gigantic process approach, and when I discovered what a value stream map was and tried to do one with them one time, and found out that pretty much everybody agreed that 50 of the boxes that they painted, only one of them really delivered value. How do we do more of that? It's kind of the thinking of how do you do more of the thing that brings value to people, brings value to your customers and that sort of thing. So that's I think and then of course you need contracts in business because there's a lot of money at stake, but you've got to collaborate too, because you can't there's this kind of understanding of software development that you couldn't really just nail down exactly what people wanted. Bob Martin's been a big proponent of this for, decades, really, about how software impacts your life. If you ask someone for software and then you give that to them and then they use it and they go, yeah, that's great, that helped, I need something else now, right? And so this is, to think you could just nail it all down. I know this has happens to me over and over and over again when I develop software for myself, so I'm my own customer. I say, this is exactly what I need. And then, it only takes 2 hours to find out I don't need that at all. I need something different, right? Right. So, planning is important and you got to follow one, but, we didn't invent the, you got to go to Eisenhower or some ancient general that says, you got to have a plan, but plan on changing it, right? When your boots hit the ground, something different is going to happen, right? And so these are kind of, I don't know, I think they're maybe timeless words of wisdom. Maybe they could be, so why doesn't the Agile Manifesto change? Because it's, right now it's a historical document. So it doesn't actually mean anything. It doesn't mean do any particular thing. It's kind of, it's a statement of values or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So.
I think I remember a rumor that you guys left with a lot of conversation, but one of you kind of pulled it together and sent it after. You didn't write the manifesto there. Is that true or?
Well, this part was on the whiteboard.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that part you can't see.
The 4.
I turned that off. Turn that back on. The thing I've been referring to right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, which of course you can't see, but this happened at the meeting, and then the 12 principles happened in like 7 million emails after for the month afterwards or something like that. I just remember them going by and it was like, I had other work I had to get done. It was dizzying to just see all these emails go flying back and forth. So,
what? You didn't have Slack?
There was no schedule. It was totally evolving through an email storm, which kind of matched in intensity the snowstorm that was at Snowbird. So.
Any other? I'm leaving some room for someone that probably has a question before I pick something from Chad. Anyone?
Yeah, I guess RD, maybe if I could jump
in. Yeah.
It sort of builds on, I think, what James has been talking about. It's my second question. Given how the values and principles have occasionally been sort of abused and misused by organizations and teams, for me, I always find that opening sentence to be the most powerful one in the overall document or in the overall site. And was there ever thought given during the meeting to kind of use a larger typeface for some of those key words in that opening sentence? I think about things like the word better, doing, helping, because that's so key. I mean, most times people just jump right to the values and they ignore that first sentence. And that's, to me, is like the greatest value of it.
Yeah. So, all this stuff was on a whiteboard. This was a photo probably taken of a whiteboard. And then the font sizes would have been probably chosen by, I'm just going to imagine, because I don't know what happened there, chosen by Ward. And then everybody said, great, Ward, that was nice of you to do that, thinking it wouldn't matter to anybody. But I think that's interesting. So you're saying, the uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it, helping others. So it's kind of we don't know the whole way already, right? There's not one answer and we got to work at it. And I have a corollary to that, which is, when you get out of engineering school, if any of you did, and then you think you know everything.
Not.
I've learned a lot since then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a time, you think you know everything, and then you find out you don't actually know. You have to get a little bit older to realize you don't know anything. So.
Mm-hmm. There is a question about. I'm gonna let who asked the question, Yunlong. It's around Scrum is updating the guide and it's kind of evolving, but the manifesto hasn't changed? I think that is the question. So what's the thinking about that? Are you scared because of 7,000 emails or?
Huh. I'm not scared.
Okay.
I can still ignore emails as good now as I did then. It's one of these skills. I mean, when you have a half a dozen email addresses, you got to be good at that.
Right.
So I don't know. I'll say, you know, you mentioned the word Scrum, so that's my entry here. So. Uh-huh. That number, what is it now? Does anybody know? It's got to be over 1 million, right?
It's
I think
exponential.
7 billion. I think 7 billion or something.
7 billion. Everybody in the world is now a Scrum Master.
Right. Yeah, and coaches are a close second.
Let's see. I've got another slide here. Let's see if I have it here or not.
Yeah. What is sad is that the majority of the things that I see on LinkedIn anymore are people offering to help people become Agile coaches.
Of course, follow the money. Follow the money, QZ. That's what it's all about.
See this little blue here?
Yep.
That's certified Scrum developers.
Mhm.
Okay. This is certified. This is 2014. It doesn't take a genius to do the math here, and I'll draw some conclusions from it. I'll do the math. Let's see. We've got, this is again, 2014 numbers or something. 300,000 certified Scrum Masters and 54,000 certified Scrum developers. That means it takes 6 Scrum Masters to master 1 developer. All right, okay. Now, sometimes I can get a laugh out of that. Now, I know you guys are more sophisticated than that.
It was a painful laugh.
But Scrum is not only used for software development nowadays. So that's kind of my question.
So I'm sorry, I'm having fun with the question. So now I'll try to be more serious if you want to ask it again.
No, right now Scrum is used beyond software development, is used in other like domains. So I just wondered, is Agile is going to be like updated to see like these principles or manifestos are going to be used beyond software development? So,
well, you know, I don't know. Has Scrum helped? I've got my opinion on that. That we probably still have a lot of the same problems with that, just different manifestations of them now. And I think that development is still, you know, one of the things that Kent was trying to do was, and I'll get close as I can to paraphrasing him, make the world safe for people that are programming and for people that need programs, right? Make the world safe for programmers and for people that need programs, right? How could they work together better? And if I go read the opinion pieces on what developers think of Agile and Scrum, engineers, what they think of it, their opinion is not very high of it. And I think at Object Mentor and when we were doing these extreme programming immersions, we bumped into something really kind of important, which I think most of the world has missed. And given an opportunity to talk about this, I talk about it. The first time we did extreme programming immersion, we started with planning and worked our way to engineering. The only reason that everybody didn't demand their money back was because they'd already read Kent's book and they just wanted to be there and hang out with him, hear what he had to say. But it didn't work that well. We somehow, through being with some people that were smart, said, let's start with programming first. And we started with the engineering, test-driven development, some of the technical skills in the first couple of days. And then we bring planning in a little bit later. And it's like, oh, iterative planning, that's easy. You know, tracking, planning, that's all very easy now that we know how to do this iterative engineering. And I see the world is adopting Agile from the management side down because it sounds like such a good idea to get shorter cycles, and engineering is getting left behind, not being shown the way. I'm thinking though that DevOps or whatever continuous delivery, whatever the name of it is kind of the logical conclusion of extreme programming. And maybe because of the need for technical rigor to be successful at continuous delivery, maybe that's going to pull in the technical side of extreme programming into more organizations. I'm hopeful anyway that it will help with that. So I probably did not come anywhere near answering the question you're asking there, Zhulong.
No.
But I
No.
not.
It's my first time to come here. I mean, so yeah, because Agile is used in so many fields, you know. So even the government of Canada is trying to using the Agile in a certain field, because I'm working for the CRA right now. So we are like
Yeah, I would think that the iterative nature.
I just gonna say, I'm not sure this has anything to do with Agile, what you're talking about, though.
Well, because I don't know, because Scrum has been updated so many times in the past like 25 years.
The manifesto is called the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. It has software development built into it, and it's kind of what we're talking about now. The fact that other people have decided to take a methodology and expand it so that they can make more money by certifying more people is maybe something a little bit different. I'm just saying.
I want to throw something. I want to throw something. I want to throw something else in there as well, if I may. So one of the big differences with it's kind of a comparison of apples and pears, right? On one side, you have the manifesto, which is kind of a value system with principles and all those kinds of things that doesn't really tell you how to do anything. It's not a methodology. If you look at the Agile Manifesto, if you look at the Agile Manifesto, you won't find any information there on how to run a project or anything like that, and or how to develop a product. Scrum is very different in that regard, right? So the fact that that is more specific, maybe a little bit more actionable, makes it more vulnerable as well to those changes that you are seeing or more necessary to be updated. Manifesto, a mindset, a belief system, a value system, that still is valid regardless of how you apply it.
Yep. So the values and principles are generic, but they're also very much specifically focused on software. I mean, especially if you read the principles, right?
Hey, Cheesy, Cheesy, can we let James talk a little bit?
No, I want to listen.
Oh, there's James.
No. I want to listen.
So what's your perspective on that, James?
Well,
with Agile now being used outside of software.
My friends in Hino, Cheesy and Hino, both kind of understand that principles are more timeless. Now, I think the principles. It does say for software, but I found these things work pretty good in other areas too. Right. So some of the, so Agile is going to get rebranded to something. It's now rebranded as DevOps or whatever. I think that'll be its new life, for continuous delivery or something. It's kind of the logical, I think, conclusion of, or not conclusion, but an extension to things like extreme programming. But the principles are more timeless, right?
Yeah.
Because
it's just the word, the terms like a software, there, but in fact we are using in different fields. So I know what's the point. I mean, they are the principle. They are worthless.
Yeah. So Cheesy, quit pressing us on the software thing. We can use it for everything. No. It is about software. So
the ideas of being lightweight actually are applicable everywhere. But I just wanted to make the distinction. A lot of people have this assumption that, the Agile Manifesto is written for everything that we possibly do. But you guys did you guys have a specific case in mind, or did you think this is right for everything?
No, we were totally focused on software. There's a bunch of nerds together. Come on, what are you talking about?
The overwhelming majority of the people there were developers, right?
Well, you know what this question is reminding me, with people joining Agile thinking and Agile tribe. for lack of a better word, recently, there is a equal sign that they put between Scrum and Agile. It's like Scrum equals Agile or Agile equals Scrum, and then we see things like that. So we forget about all the other things that Agile stood on the shoulders of other giants, and Scrum was not just the only one, right?
Well, the thing is, in the early days, for many of us, Agile equaled extreme programming.
That's right.
That's what Agile means to me. So,
it still means that to me.
Extreme programming.
James, since it was created, I mean, did you guys, like 17 of you guys, ever thought about to update this one, or like, I'm just curious, you know?
No one's interested in doing that. I mean, none of the people involved in it. We kind of think of it as just like a moment in time, right? It was a historical document, right? And but you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
You know, so it doesn't mean there can't be more evolution of our ideas. It's not telling anybody to do anything except, you know, work with each other in a more humane way, right?
What I think one of the great powers of the manifesto is, rather than try to make it this thing that was constantly evolving, it was something that was given to the community, and the community has chosen to sort of take it and create their own versions of it. I mean, if you look at between modern Agile, if you look at disciplined Agile, there were flavors done, there were changes made, or new versions of values put out there. And I think that's fine. I think that's something where every organization, every community can take it and make it their own. That is the true essence of agility. It is that adaptation.
Hmm.
You know, in one of my early extreme programming coaching endeavors, the first team I worked with, we did a bunch of good things. We all learned a lot of interesting things. And then the company I'm with said, we want to do that again. And let's get another team and let's do it exactly the same way. And it's like, you know, exactly the same way is not going to work unless it's exactly the same people, right? We're not going to be able to do it exactly the same way. You know, so the new batch of people that I'm coaching with, some of them were really into modeling and wanted to model. And so it's like, okay, we're going to model more, you know, and right. So there isn't just one way. It's not like a really good bread, you know, or baking, like baking. Someone discovered the one way to make like that perfect cake or whatever, and you better make it that way. Otherwise it's not going to turn out so great.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be a state like this forever. And plus, 17 of you wouldn't gather together anymore. I don't think
the Agile Manifesto. No, I don't think so. I'd be happy to, especially if it involved going skiing and snowboard again. And I was tempted to go this year, but because of COVID and other personal things, I can't go. But also my knees are objecting now to skiing. So that means I have to go. But, you know, it's not a great year for traveling. So.
Well, different versions of manifestos have been created, right? Cheesy put a link there for one of them, and there are like
good one.
So there are different variations. I think what James is saying also echoes some of the things I've heard from Ron Jeffries before, saying, well, you can do anything you want. We are not changing what we wrote. And I don't know if there is any value or if they have filled something that was missing. Like people try to fill a void that they find, but what were they? What are they?
Yeah, well, personally, I just want to know why my code works.
And what is the under that? What does it say?
Well, let's see. The top is why doesn't my code work? The bottom is why does my code work?
The code works fine. Mm-hmm. Both are very valid questions.
I just want it to work on purpose instead of by accident.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then I've got a simplified view of the world, and my what I can do for others is minimal, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Chris, before we move to the fun questions, Chris, you have a question here about academic research. Do you wanna bring that up?
Yeah, I have the luxury of teaching in a college, and I have money and time to do research. And I did a little bit on a company that was going through a transition from waterfall to agile, and what's working, what's not working. They gave me access to like 40 people to interview and kind of test out a few queries that I had around it. But I was looking for your perspective or anyone else's perspective on, if you had this luxury of time and money, what kind of academic topics would you research in Agile?
I've got a great topic for you to research, and I could also generate a ton of data for you with it, which is test-driven development more effective than debug later programming? So that's my joke name for the way that most people program, which is however they happen to do it, debug later programming. I'd be, if you'd like to, think about that one, when people take my training class, we use a system called Cyber Dojo, and I have the same exact thing. And I've done some experiments where I've asked people in the wild to, here's this problem, would you solve it any way you want? And here's what it's supposed to do. And when you're done, send me a link to it and I'll see if it passes my tests. And I've got some interesting information from that. Like the best ever person I saw solve the problem without tests spent a half hour writing the initial code, 10 minutes getting it compiled, and an hour testing it. So about an hour and 45 minutes, let's say. And then the worst person I saw try it gave up, after 6 hours. But most people end up at about, if they don't have any unit testing experience, they finish in about 2 to 2.5 hours. And if they do have some unit testing experience, they take about 3 hours to complete it. Okay. If they're doing test-driven development, in my class, brand new at test-driven development, they finish it in about an hour and a half. But everybody that does it in an hour and a half thinks that they're really slow when actually they're better than the best guy I ever saw do it without tests. So it'd be interesting if there was a researcher out there. Was that Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah, send me an email. And maybe there'd be a way I could make we could come up with devise an experiment that you might be able to get people to take that doesn't seem to have an agenda like mine would be, to show the test-driven development. I actually just wanted to know, so I could say, well, that's going to take you a half hour longer, but it's worth it because as soon as you change it once, you would have spent an hour for that one change. But, I can now say from my anecdotal data that if you learn how to do this, you'll be faster than you were before, right away, not a future payback of when you make some change that you're not even going to ever make, but you're right away faster is what my experience has shown. Now, that's what I'm interested in. So that what I might be able to steer you towards. And if that sounds interesting, let's talk about that.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, had this dream of doing research around agile success and like measures of success, but that finding the actual people who've measured and quantified has been.
Yeah. Are you Dr. Chris Speakman?
No.
Okay, but
I'm a college faculty here in Ontario. I lived as a
sounds like a thesis to me, Doc. I mean, future Doc.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? I don't want to ask all my questions.
I put up the half-arsed Agile manifesto.
Yeah. I posted that.
The actual words, except in more serious font. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And we have mandatory processes and tools to control those individuals. We prefer the term resources. Interact. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
All right. At any rate, you all can read that as homework.
Mm-hmm. So Rob is asking what lies beyond Agile, what comes next. But actually, I wanted to ask before that, what do you think of Agile now? From what you were thinking then, and what do you see now?
I was kind of amazed 10 years ago, when Agile was really growing in popularity, and that it actually, meant something important to have been part of the creation of that, and that you people actually wanted to talk to me tonight because of going skiing 20 years ago. Right? So I appreciate that. That's kind of nice. I could tell you about the snow conditions. No, I'm sorry.
It's coming. It's coming.
So there I go, distracting myself again with trying to be silly, but there was no expectation from me or anybody else that anybody would care about the Agile Manifesto. And it was about 2008 when I was leaving Object Mentor, because I wanted to get people doing embedded systems to know about TDD, and I couldn't really do it at Object Mentor because no one would go there for that, because they'd go to Object Mentor and go, this isn't about embedded systems, so let's go somewhere else. And one of my friends that I worked with said, well, yeah, you should start your own company because you were part of the creation of the Agile Manifesto. It's like instant credibility. It's like, what are you talking about? And okay, well, it turned out that it's really a nice thing to have on my resume. There was no expectation of that, and at the time, and it is kind of, well, you never know what's going to happen. It's always, if you're happen to be at a good place and if you work hard, good things tend to happen. And so one thing I kind of had in my nature was working hard at things, and then the other thing is I bumped into some fortunate places to be. With people and ideas that made a difference. So, what's going to happen beyond Agile? I would just love to see if engineering would start to embrace iterative and incremental development. Maybe we have to change it to a more generic name like that. Like the word sprint is something I object to. Why object to that? Let's see if I can find that easily here. Where'd it go? I lost it. Well, anyway, you've seen the Olympics. You know about sprints.
Yeah.
Everybody's laying around in the being fed oxygen, right? So I guess I'd like to, to see. I used to think there are two halves to Agile, and I tell the story fairly often when a group is, what are the two halves to Agile? And I was out with some people in this. I told this guy who's a business guy, I said, the world is doing the easy half of Agile. And then he looked at me and said, well, what's the hard half of Agile? And I said, well, the technical side's the hard half. And he goes, no, the hard half is the people half. And it's like, oh no, Agile has three halves. Oh, shoot. Three halves. It's got the planning half, it's got the people half, and it's got the technical half. It's like, oh no wonder it's so hard. So, you can follow the rules. Somebody said earlier, right? Scrum has some rules to follow. Now, you're not supposed to follow them forever because they've got this thing in there called retrospect, which is, look at what Ken Schwaber in 2003, when he taught one of the first ever Scrum classes, it was at our company, Object Mentor. And we said, Ken, why didn't you mention extreme programming in there? It's like, well, it's not my business to tell people how to do that. They're going to be problem solving, then they'll find extreme programming. They haven't found it yet, I'm pretty sure. Some, of course, in some pockets, but it's not part of their daily life. And then now when companies adopt iterative and incremental planning, and then they just expect people to do it, that's not very humane. That's not taking the human factor into it, where you're respecting people. And so the three halves of Agile, and maybe there's more, would be, the easy part, the process of planning. Probably the hardest part, the people, which Ward and Ken and everybody were talking about in 2001. And then the technical part, which is, how do we maintain the quality? It's like a hard thing to bring those together. So I would like to see more of that. I mean, obviously it's self-serving because I teach people the technical side. I have nothing to do with the people side, except I just try to be nice to people. But you know, I fail at that sometimes too. But
so, what do you think about you know, DevOps and continuous delivery ways of working right now? Are they advancing on the XP or?
I think they could. Extreme Programming Immersion 1, 1999. One of the guys in attendance, he wrote a little thing in my book, a little story, because he told the story at the immersion. And what they built was a machine that made French fries. So pretty much all the French fries that are consumed, you know, in the United States go through one of their machines. And what happens is, you know, the potatoes get dumped in a dump truck into the back of the thing. They start going down conveyor belts. I've never seen the machine running, but I'm just embellishing the story and probably maybe adding some details I've made up over the years. But they did say, along with the potatoes are golf balls and other things, because the farmer, you know, has some spare time while the potatoes are growing. So they lose some golf balls out there. My dad owned a farm and he lost a lot of golf balls out in the cornfield. And so this machine would send the potatoes through, clean them, get rid of the golf balls, send them through these slicers, which are like bunches of knives. And if they were, as they're coming back out, there's electric eyes watching the French fries. And if they're not perfect, they get shot out of the air, a gap between two conveyor belts with air guns. This is in 1999. And their process involved, if they made a code change, it would go through the entire process of building their code and give them an ISO image that they could have burned on a CD if they wanted to. Okay, now because deployment meant burning the CD and actually putting it in a machine, that part was manual. But in 1999, these guys were doing that. So for me, that is the ideal of extreme programming. And so when I hear about people doing DevOps, I think, well, yeah, kind of, it's about time. Not that I know how to do it myself personally, but why, you know, the world thinking about that, if there's a manual repetitive process, you should automate it. And this is, you know, so I think that's kind of a logical extension of the pragmatic programmers telling us to automate things 20 something years ago, and extreme programming encouraging automated acceptance tests and automated builds and continuous integration, all this stuff. I kind of think it seems to be the next, you know, if you're going to keep stamping out manual processes, that's where you're going to be, right? And if your quality is high, you could deliver features, you know, as soon as they're ready. Why not? So.
Well, to do that, we need more of those certified software developers, right? And you keep mentioning Uncle Bob there, but he has an idea about the fact that developers don't have a regulated kind of way of being thrown into the job, right? So doctors and lawyers they go through several layers, while developers, anyone can do it. And the cheapest, the better, right? So it doesn't matter. It's not about the skills, it's about the price sometimes. So
yeah.
Else, Uncle Bob mentions that developers should have right to say no, and it should be safe, like lawyer can tell to his client, because like, no, I don't want to do anything harmful. And
yeah,
one of his examples.
Yeah. So
yeah, is there any progress on this? Maybe like this, some association that define principles for being good developer, good engineer?
I don't know. But I know, you know, if we want to be able to have anybody take it seriously, here's a way to ruin your reputation. And, you know, this may be a retold story that you may have heard before, but what if, oh, here's this feature, I could give it to you. how long? Oh, how long is this feature going to take? Well, it's going to take 3 months. Oh, but I need it in 2. Wrong answer. Can you give it to me in 2? Prove to me you can't give it to me in 2. I can't prove it. Okay, so 2 is the number. Okay, now 2 rolls around. We're going to need some more time. Remember? Oh yeah, well, you can have an extra week. You need some more time. Okay, now we're back up to the original. We need some more time. Then you deliver something that doesn't work. And then people get to chase around the bugs. And just let me say, how's your reputation at that point? Right? So I think, we're not helping ourselves. Now, here's the problem is that programming is hard and people don't know ways to kind of control programming. I know when I learned it was, here's how to do an if statement. Here's how to make a variable. Here's a while loop. Go write an operating system. Nobody said how to think through a problem. Nobody taught you how to think through a problem. I don't know if it's different in academia now, but then it wasn't. And pretty much when I asked people how they learned how to program, they pretty much learned how to program by being given programming problems to solve, not that they were guided anywhere. Now, are there things that we could do to start to control that process? And well, I certainly am of the opinion that the practices of extreme programming help us control that process, in that, that would be an important thing to do. Now, a lot of people, well, I think there's a lot of no awareness of it at all. And people get programs to work because they have an aptitude to get programs to work. They passed the aptitude test. They got the app to work.
The app works.
There's more to it than that, though.
After watching a few videos from Uncle Bob, I get impressions that actually Agile, it was kind of side project. It was designed to help developers like remove some impediments and make their work better. But his real focus really in engineering, like solid principles, TDD, and all this stuff, clean code, well, right?
Bob's an engineer too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where I come from is is the engineering side, and Bob does as well. So
one of the things that you are famous of is the planning poker. I mean, apart from other things, right? And being the author of Manifesto and everything. Yeah. How did that come up, and do you still would you still use it?
Here is an exact replica of the first planning poker deck.
Oh my God, we're seeing the original.
Well, I could.
Looks empty.
The original planning poker deck. Note cards. So I was kind of shocked to see people going out of their way to go and do this stuff and write apps to do this. It's like kind of funny. So the story of planning poker, it's kind of fun. It's one of those moments in time. Bob was encouraging me to write things, and we were working with this client out in Utah, and I was at the planning table. I was coaching a team. Maybe the first time I coached a team through planning. I had never done it. Okay. I mean, never done it except in a toy example. This was a real product. And I'll tell you about what the manager said after he read my paper. But if you remind me, because that was kind of funny. But we're around this table, and the two architects are at both sides of the table, and they're talking for an hour. And I'm coaching this meeting. It's like, oh man, you guys, it's like, you have to talk for an hour. And I started to notice that, in the first 5 minutes, they would both say the same number, and then they would talk about it for an hour. Now, what do people cite as the value of planning poker?
Quick.
It gets people to talk, right? I was trying to get people to shut up. So how do you get people to shut up? Well, at Teradyne, Total Quality Management said, don't do your brainstorming out loud. have everybody write down their own opinion. So we took a break after a couple of stories and a couple of hours, and I asked everybody to grab a note card and don't show, but listen to the story, write your guess on the card, and then all at once we're going to reveal. So you don't want to have that, what's it called, telegraphing, right? And you don't want the most, I'm trying to think of a word besides obnoxious, the most powerful person in the room to, say what the right answer is, so everybody can go, oh yeah, it's definitely what Cheesy said, right? It was definitely Cheesy's, or maybe it was Ardita's. It was Ardita's, yeah, for sure. So after a couple of rounds of that, people were, of course, reusing their note cards. So they had a hand of cards here, and I like to play poker, and so it looked like we were playing poker. And so I wrote a little story about that. And then a couple of weeks later, I put it on our website, and I went back to the client, and the client said, right away, I walked in the front door, he dragged me off to a conference room, says, "You guys are making all this shit up." It's like, you got to bleep that out, okay? You guys are making all this stuff up. It's like, I really couldn't deny it. It's like, I forget what I said, but it's like, hey, we're solving problems. Really, it is kind of a problem solving. What was the problem? People were agreeing on the same thing, and they were identifying where they disagree, so we could actually spend more time on that or defer that, right? And so, with us starting to do planning poker with this small stack of stories, we were able to get through it pretty quickly. And the numbers were wrong anyway, so why not be wrong quickly instead of taking a long time to be wrong? That's kind of the whole perspective of it. About a year after that, my colleague Lowell Lindstrom, and I know many of you know Lowell, he also was part of the Teradyne contingent, where we were learning TQM. He actually was the head of TQM for a year. He said, hey, we should try this other thing for estimating. Instead of estimating each story, why don't we start grouping them all into similar difficulty, and then we can just score each column. And so that was about a year after playing poker, and it's like, oh yeah, that's much better, especially if you have a stack of stories. Let's do that, and we can do 100 stories in an hour instead of 100 5-minute discussions, right? 500 minutes. And so we started doing that. In the meantime, Mike Cohn discovers my paper and says, hey, can I put that in my book? And sure, put it in your book. That'd be great. And then he starts printing up cards. And now if I go do a search on Twitter, I find out that people are discovering planning poker still today and doing it. It's like, oh, come on. Well, it's like, okay, it does solve a problem. Now, usually people are solving the wrong problem with it. But at any rate, planning poker was to get people to shut up.
Should that go on the manifesto? Individuals and interactions to shut up?
Well, actually, so the technique part of, from TQM was, if we all put our ideas down and then we could find out where we agreed quickly, then we could either action that. I mean, just kind of imagine this if in government, and I don't want to talk about government because, well, for obvious reasons. What if we could go out there and say, hey, we agree on these certain things. Let's go do those things we agree on. No, instead, let's fight about what we don't agree on. All right. So our world is dominated by the latter, right? And what if you could go and decide what you did agree on? Well, then someone would have to win. No, nobody would. We all win if we could agree on something and go do it. Kind of, for a little while, politics worked that way. But, so interactions, right? Find where you agree. And then if there's something important that you don't agree on, then to go invest in that. But why overinvest where you agree, right? Just to hear everybody talk to each other. It's like not worth it. So,
yeah.
Structured problem solving stuff is really, if you take one thing out of this meeting, the next time you're having a brainstorming session, get out the note cards, right? Or the Post-it notes and do the brainstorm quietly. And, I remember Ron Jeffries saying to me, there you go, why wouldn't we want to talk while we're doing this? It's like, I don't know, Ron, let's just try it. he wasn't sure why you wouldn't want to talk. I guess because, well, never. I'm not going to say anything. Ron's not here.
Well, we have about 10 minutes left. There are some questions here from Cheesy and Hino about what was the most fun you had while tubing down mountains outside of Salt Lake City, and some questions around the beer. I think that you are a beer aficionado.
A beer fan, yes. Okay, so I'll move these questions over here. Yeah. So, well, it's kind of funny. I got interviewed by a company at the Atlantic or something. They did a big article on Agile, and this person decided they had to fact check me, and because one of the things I said, I was generous with my time. I gave them a half hour of my time. I said, and it was a huge blizzard out there. So they fact checked me about the blizzard on a site that would predict what the weather might be on a given day in February, not on what the weather was on that day in February. And they felt it was important to contradict me in their articles. That really endeared me to them. But it's like, what? Why do we? Okay, so anyway, I have witnesses that it was snowing out. Anyway, one of my most memorable things with now the late Mike Beadle, he and I went out. We were both from Chicago. We didn't really know each other, but he was friend of Bob's and I was friend of Bob's. So we ended up, and he liked to ski. So we ended up skiing together. And we were in some really fun stuff where the powder was really deep and it was very steep and there were trees all around and really a dangerous place to be, but it was great because there's so much snow you couldn't go very fast. And I still have that vividly in my mind, that run.
But as agile people, you maneuver quickly and agilely, right?
Some more than others.
What about beers?
Well, when you're drinking beer up at 12,000 feet, it doesn't feel as good the next day. Yeah, I don't know that there was. Oh, you're in Salt Lake. It's a matter of fact that it's run by the Mormons, and they have some. The Mormons get to make the rules about drinking. They don't drink, and it's kind of interesting. Now I've got a lot of Mormon friends, so they're good guys. John Johansson and some of the other people out there, they put up with so much abuse from their non-Mormon counterparts there, because when you're at a meeting, half the people are Mormon. They're telling Mormon jokes. The Mormons aren't. The people that aren't. And then the Mormons are just taking it really nice. They're very nice, good value people. And but one of the non-Mormons was complaining about the drinking laws in Salt Lake City. He said, they don't even drink. How come they get to make the rules? And I thought that was kind of funny. But I think some of the laws they made backfired, because I do remember having a beer at a bar and I had about this much left. And I know you didn't want this random story, I suppose. It sounds like an old guy talking now. But so I said, sure, I'm ready. I'm about ready for another one. So they come back and wait person is standing there with the beer. It's like, you could set it down. It's like, no, sir, I can't set it down because you haven't finished your other one. You're only allowed to have one. It's like, okay, so what do I have to do? I got to chug the one. Okay, I think the laws had unintended consequences. I'm just saying. I had to chug the one that was almost done so that they could drop off the new one, or they were going to just stand there all night.
Yeah.
Well, you're not far off though with what people usually do with laws that you put and regulations and
I know way around it.
all the Scrum rules have been gamed and have been worked around. So
that's right. Yeah.
People.
Any memorable beers recently though?
Well,
James?
my wife did. I've been slowly working my way into them, but I did get an advent calendar of beer from my wife.
Interesting.
It involved, and a friend of mine got them too. So we kind of decided we're going to have them together, but I've been cheating a little bit. So it's an advent calendar of German beer. And, so I've just been sticking to the local beer from Pennsylvania down here. I know Paul usually brings a good beer when we meet somewhere, something that you can only drink like one of.
Yeah.
Things have changed on the beer front in Salt Lake City. Actually, last time I was there, which was just a few years ago, the requirement now is that you have to order food with your beer. So when you order a beer, you get a $9 little cup full of peanuts as well.
All right. Well, there you go. Got to do what you got to do, Cheesy. There's always
So, has there been any question that I haven't asked that probably we would have asked, or someone has like one burning question?
I had a question about what happens next with Agile. Where does it go next?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? There's three halves. One half is healthy. The other two halves are underrepresented. And yeah, so I guess, I would like to see them more evenly represented. But, so that's, I think that's one of the problems.
Mm-hmm.
If people tried to solve problems rather than follow dogmatic rules, right? Now, sometimes the rules help you help you discover something, right? And so I think in all well-meaning Scrum's perspective, if you follow, I think what they say is, and I haven't read that in so long that who knows if I even have an understanding anymore, but do these things and then start finding out what doesn't work and then make it better, right? So at the core, it's supposed to be problem solving. And, in TQM, there was one of those things too. I'll see if I can find my my picture of this. I had a picture of that. Let's see, where is it? In total quality management, there's the structured problem solving, PDCA. It comes under different flavors, right? Which is identify a problem, imagine a solution, try the solution, and if it works, make it part of everyday work, right? And so this is what Scrum is supposed to, this is what the retrospective is supposed to do, even though I don't think they mention PDCA, but I think it's kind of, that's what the idea is. And here's what is happening instead. They're doing Scrum or doing Agile, and they're leaving out the hard part, right? These plan, do, check, act parts. The actual, what's the problem now? What could we do instead? And, there's a lot of happy to be going through the motions and following the dogma rather than solving the problems. And that's, I'd like to see us, as an engineer, of course, I'm interested in solving problems. And I'd like to see us solve some of those problems. If we decided to solve problems, we probably could.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the reason why we usually get together, teams, right, to solve the problems.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, has been a blast. Thank you so much for your time and for volunteering your time and your thoughts and your memories and your future visions and desires with us. This was amazing.
Like I said earlier, you guys must not have had anything better to do with the lockdowns. Okay, so I understand.
No.
Not true.
But thank you so much for being with us, and thanks everyone for joining.
Well, it was an honor for you to ask me, and I'm just a guy who went skiing 20 years ago. I keep telling you that, but you still wanted my opinions anyway, so I gave them to you. And,
no, for us was more than that. So thank you, and thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you in our next one. Bye.
Thank you, Ardita. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, James. Ardita.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Good to see you.